Good morning, good evening, wherever and whatever time you may be listening to this new episode of Faith and Law. We took a week off. Our fearless leader Jonathan had to go on vacation, so we took an episode off. But we are back in the studio recording with, of course, Jonathan and one of my favorite people in the world, and I mean that. Dr. Rhonda Sims does so much for our community, has such a credentialed background, and we look forward to hearing so many great things that she's doing, even after she left our local college here, and she's got back in the saddle and just doing amazing things. But Jonathan, how's things at the Commonwealth Attorney Office?
Well, good morning, everybody. Things are busy. Unfortunately, there's job security when you're in the kind of business that I'm in, and I'll say we've had a busy summer and lots going on, and sometimes wish that we didn't have quite as much activity, Dr. Sims. I wish people could get along and not do the crazy things that they do, but that's what voters elected me to handle, and I can just say that there's plenty of that to handle.
And on that note, when you said voters asked you to or voted you in, and maybe it's because of our connection through the podcast, but I hear nothing but positive reviews about you in the community from both sides of the political aisle. So keep doing what you're doing. And
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's a sacred obligation that we take as when we're elected to public office, and I take it very seriously. And we try hard to be ethical, to be professional, and to be diligent. And it's a lot of work. And you know I would just say this: you can't please everyone. So
sure,
I'll just say. Yeah. You probably haven't talked to enough people, or you'd find folks that are they're not happy with this or that outcome, and that's just part of what we deal with.
Sure.
May talk about some of that today, actually. So, but thank you for that.
I've pastored for combined over 20 years now, and I have not made everyone happy either. So I understand.
Dr. Sims, do you make them all happy in your role?
No, unfortunately not.
Yeah. Dr. Sims, it is truly awesome. I'm trying to remember where I first met you, maybe when we were on the CASA board together.
Yes, sir.
And you have been such a blessing in our lives and blessed our church. You bought so many strawberries during Valentine's Day. And not for yourself, I don't think, but for you give them away, which goes to just the heart of who you are. Tell us a little about your background. I think you're from this area.
Well, yes, of course, originally from Tollsboro,
Right.
Kentucky,
Yep.
and married here and been living in, Mason County ever since, I married Tom. And we've been blessed to be residents. This is Tom's hometown, kind of around the Minerva area. And years ago, my mother was a nurse, and I kind of developed an interest in nursing from her, and I took care of my father-in-law when he was terminally ill with lung cancer. I had a business degree and kind of got in that role because my husband was the only child and his mother was deceased. So once I took care of him, I kind of got interest in nursing, and then it just evolved. I'm an alumni of the college here, went on to Midway College, had a couple degrees there, and then also an alumni of Walden University, had a couple master's degrees from those folks and a dual doctorate degree. I have a doctorate in clinical practice and nursing leadership and management, and gave almost 25 years to Maysville Community College in their registered nursing program. Helped to build a couple new programs while I was there. And then due to Midway College and the education they afforded me the opportunity to explore the avenue of becoming a sexual assault nurse examiner, or we're called forensic nurses, and I've been doing that for about 24 years too. I contract with Mediview Regional Hospital and Fleming County Hospital to serve their clients in need of a sexual assault exam. Was trained in assessment for strangulation. I was trained by the medical pathologist who was very active in the George Floyd case years ago. And so I learned how to assess for strangulation through sexual assault, domestic violence, and partner violence.
Wow.
And currently I'm consulting with and on faculty with Midway University, where I've just recently helped them and assisted them. We just got 2 weeks ago our final approval from ACEN, that's an accrediting body for nursing programs, and the Board of Nursing called KBN, that we were approved for a graduate level, master's level forensic nurse program that will roll out this fall. And that's the first in the state. The closest one to us is Xavier University has one. And we'll have a mix of sexual assault nurse examiner training with that, along with criminal justice, because they had a criminal justice program there. So that's been a very tedious attempt, because you have to jump through a lot of hoops. But luckily, thank the Lord above, we were able to succeed at that.
Wow. That's an impressive background. I have admired your work, and might I say unfortunate work, as a SANE provider in this area. One of the things, and I just used this in a message I preached recently about being able to connect with people, and from a spiritual perspective as a pastor, we get people that from all walks of life, from the very bottom of the barrel to people that are, what society would call the upper echelon or whatever. But one of the first things that you do when you walk into the hospital and you begin interacting with someone that's been assaulted is you ask them if they've eaten.
Yes.
Or if they're hungry.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you supply that one need first.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Can you expound upon that a bit?
Yes. As most of us are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, yep. And what's those basic needs. And many of my clients that I've taken care of over the past 20 plus years have not come from the best backgrounds either. Many times it's alcohol abuse. They've been trafficked for sexual use. Drug abuse. Maybe they've come in here seeking a job. I'll never forget. I had a client one night, and she'd been brought to me from a facility that incarcerates individuals, and something had happened to her prior to an arrest, and she needed to be cared for by a SANE nurse. And when she came in, she was very small, very frail, and I just thought, how hard this must be. You've been incarcerated now, and you have been assaulted. And, sometimes people have a bad impression about people incarcerated too. Good people get incarcerated. I'm going to say that. Good people get incarcerated. Good people make mistakes, but they shouldn't have to pay for it the rest of their life because they made a mistake.
Correct.
And so this particular lady, I remember sitting down. I generally just walk in, and of course I have a kit. There's a box that you have with A through Z, so to speak, steps in it. And I don't even open that. I don't even talk about that. I just tell them my name, a little bit about myself. I'm a nurse. I'm here to help you. And, tell me a little bit about yourself. And this particular young lady, she was actually a nurse too. And she became incarcerated due to a nasty divorce. And she had child support to pay, and she wasn't able to pay for the child support. So she had to turn to a way of life that most of us never dream of, having to be trafficked. And so, I tried to put myself in her place, how that must have felt, and I wanted her, number one, to trust me. They have to, number one, feel like they can trust you. And so it's kind of like I said, I just sit down with the basics, and if it's, would you like something, to drink, eat? Of course, I do have to assess their mouth based on the history of their assault. And so, I first kind of ask them a little bit about their assault, and then I will offer them something to eat in case, many times we've had clients that's lived in a car for 3 days after an assault, with no food, no money, no means to buy food. So I want them to, number one, trust me, because I'm there for them. I'm not there to judge them in any way. And to me, to show that you have some compassion, be it through just, tell me a little bit about yourself, or, I appreciate what you've been through, or when was the last time you ate? You know, I feel it's important that
Absolutely.
we build that trust and that initial bond, because I am there to help them. I'm not there to judge them. I'm not there to say, yep, he or she, because I have male clients too, have been assaulted or sexually violated. I'm not there. I'm not the judge. You know, I'm just there to collect the evidence, you know, to go onto the crimes lab so that this case can go before, you know, our court system and, you know, someone be held accountable for this crime. It's a violent crime. And I tell them that. It's the same as if someone had stole your purse. This is a crime. No one asked to be sexually violated, assaulted in any way.
Wow. That takes someone special and, in my opinion, gifted and called from the Lord to be able to do this kind of work. Jonathan, I know in your line of work, these things are undoubtedly crucial when working through a case to have this type of evidence.
They are, absolutely, and unfortunately not enough of the cases that we work do we see this kind of forensic evidence. And so instead, what we're often faced with is a situation where it's a he said, she said, and police officers will investigate and usually make an arrest based on initial allegation, on strangulation and sexual assault as well, and molestation, and then it will get to us, and so we're working with the victim, and the victim is the person that has the entirety of the evidence. The victim's testimony is the entirety of the evidence. And those cases are really difficult. That's why I'm so grateful to have forensic evidence when we do, is because it gives us one more data point. And it also, and I'd like to hear your perspective on this, Dr. Sims, something we struggle with a lot in my office is we work cases where someone has been assaulted or violated, and they'll give an initial disclosure, they'll do a CAC exam, and then they get to the point where they're ready to move on with their lives. And I can respect that. They've been traumatized. And on the one hand, we want to honor what that victim wants. We want to help that victim and not have that victim have to go up and testify in front of 12 strangers, in front of a courtroom, and in front of the defendant in most instances, and talk about what was one of the most horrible, if not the most horrible thing that's ever happened to them. But in order to get that justice that we ultimately want, we need that testimony. And so that's the balancing act that we're continually trying to walk, and it's difficult. And that's why I'm grateful again for forensic evidence, because that gives us one more data point. I wish that more of our cases had forensics. Forensics has an opportunity to slow the case down because you're waiting for the evidence, and it gives us an opportunity to hopefully get the victim where they're in a position where they can corroborate as well. But again, I'm grateful when we do have cases where there's forensics involved.
Yeah, I've noticed over the years that I've been conducting these exams to help prosecution, those offenders that it's not their first time, we kind of, call it's not their first rodeo, so to speak. They'll customarily, during the act of the assault, use a form of protection, physical protection. Number one, so I'm sure they don't want to acquire the disease, but the main reason is so there's no evidence. So many times, even in my interview process or intake process, I will ask the client, my patient, even more details outside of just that physical assault that happened, the personal part. I will even ask, what did the assailant do right afterwards? So in case, like protection, a physical protection, a barrier, like a condom was used, where did maybe he take that? If it was assault to where, if it's okay, I can speak this, Frank.
Sure.
The assailant maybe didn't complete the act within the client, where was that act finished out? Carpeting, bedding. So I can also inform state police or local police, city police, look here, we have took evidence from seats in a car. We've took evidence from carpet on floor. We've taken evidence, out of trash cans, bathing material. So it's just not me, just physically, A through Z, getting the evidence, but through that intake and as they evolve their details of the event, what else as a SANE nurse or sexual assault nurse examiner should I be listening for that I can help add to that prosecution and, acquire more evidence because, the client many times has watched their assailant, walk away. One time we actually got, this is before your time, Jonathan, I was with the other attorney, we got a prosecution on a gentleman who left part of his, I'll just say pubic hair as a trophy inside an automobile. And it was the lady's automobile. And I was in the ER and I took a little container we use that when a child loses a tooth or something, we use it for dental purposes. And I took that container and was able to give that to the state police, have him go out there and capture that evidence in the location where the assailant said he left it and his means. Many times I know myself, a lot of times a lot of nurses won't come forward to be forensic nurses or sexual assault nurse examiners because they don't want that courtroom part, so to speak. They don't want to testify either. And so, because we're not trained in nursing school to be expert testimony. So I have been at the courthouse one time. I know Flemingsburg had my hand on the door handle to go in and testify to my exam and my evidence. And the judge, I think, had said at that time, well, the forensic nurse will begin to testify her part now. And then I'm telling you what, that was the quickest plea deal I ever seen in my life because that attorney had told his client, that lady comes in, she means business. And so lots of times just our presence has helped to, have an assailant or a defendant, say, hey, I'm going to take that deal or, I don't want to hear what she has to say. And one of the things I do as a sexual assault nurse examiner, when I'm taking my intake down and I'm writing the event, I let them start. I tell them, where do you want to start? You want to tell me, things that maybe led up to this, where were you? I just listen. I do a lot of writing and we write in layman's terms so that when we're before a jury that don't understand big medical words that I might use, that they can understand layman's terms. And sometimes they're pretty plain layman's terms in regards to what the client says. And I put everything in quotation marks. And I also reiterate to the client before I'm done, I said, I'm going to read this back to you because I don't want the first time they hear it is when I have to read it in court of law. And then I don't want them sitting there thinking, no, that's not what I meant, or I forgot to say this, or I forgot to say that. I want them to hear their own words. Many times when I have someone on the fence, because we do an exam whether they want to seek prosecution or not, because we'll keep those kits that's secured at both facilities under quality management. I want to add that too, that if someone comes in, they have the choice whether to seek law enforcement to be involved in prosecution. And so many times when they're on the fence on whether to go forward with prosecution or report it to the law, they're like, when they hear their own words, they get angry and they're like, yes, I want this person to be held responsible for what they did to me, because you're right, this is a crime. So there's a lot of aspects, and I don't know if you'd say psychological aspects, but there's a lot of things that as the healthcare provider and myself as the forensic nurse that I have to take into account. Some exams, normally an exam will take at least 2-3 hours. I've had them last 8 hours. Because again, we do a thing where if you don't want this done just yet, we don't have to do it. It's kind of, I hate to say the word stop and start, but I've had them where, yes, I want my significant other in here. No, I don't want that. Or if it's a child, over a certain age, there's some things I don't want the parents to hear, so I have to maybe ask them to step out, because no matter the age of my clients, and I can do them from literally birth to the tomb, so to speak. They are in charge. They've already had so much control taken from them, and I'm not going to add to that. The healthcare system's kind of frightening. I do have a lot of clients that don't even reside here, come from Ohio, had clients from West Virginia, because they didn't want to go to their hometown hospital. Educated, like you said earlier, highly educated individuals that unfortunately got their stuff kind of in a mess, so for better lack of words, that erupted and resulted in sexual assault. And so lots of times those individuals will come out of the area where they live just so they don't walk into an ER and see half the nurses that they might know or a doctor. Our doctors and nurses here at both hospitals are excellent. They call right away. Then the crisis center is called because that's a state law that they have to provide advocacy. The patient doesn't have to take an advocate, but it's available. They come to the hospital. And then the doctor, he checks the patient over and makes sure that there's no urgent medical need. And then if he gives medical clearance, which I have to ask that when I walk in, is the patient medically cleared? And be it the PA or nurse practitioner or the physician. And once he says yes, then the client basically becomes mine through the rest of the hospital stay. And then they're interviewed by law enforcement. Many times that's at the end, but I kind of wait and I share as much documentation because our forms are triplicate. One goes with the kit, one stays with the hospital, and one goes to law enforcement. So I try to kind of fit them in so they're not asking the same questions that I just asked. And again, we don't want to re-traumatize that client. Just over and over. Your doctor had to ask so many questions. I've had an array of questions. Advocacy has some questions. And I just don't want to just keep cycling them back to the traumatic event. So that's the whole reason for SART teams, sexual assault response teams, which is your legal side, your law enforcement side, and the medical side and the advocacy side. It's so that we can all work on cases together collectively and we don't add any more harm and trauma to our client than absolutely necessary.
Wow. Extensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be, yes.
And so you have been with Midway in a new role in the last year or two?
Yeah, since last fall.
Last fall. I think you told me about that not long after you had connected with them. And you are helping to develop or have already helped to develop a master's level program. And maybe you can take it from there because I don't want to muddy the water.
Yeah, we're ready to roll out because we've got all the accrediting bodies on board. Master's graduate level forensic nurse program. And so this kind of, like I said, the first in the state. And they'll come and have a whole array of classes. Like I said, criminal justice will be involved. The sexual assault piece will be involved. And the sexual assault piece allows them then to, like myself and other SANEs, to set for licensure. Because there is a license we have to hold and keep. Just because I'm a nurse doesn't make me a sexual assault nurse examiner. You have to take the training, pass, the test, and then be licensed by the Kentucky Board of Nursing. So we hope to have a great interest in that. We plan to roll that out into hospitals where there's SANEs that's already employed there, maybe with a BSN level. And I think, and we've brought on the Kentucky Association of Sexual Assault Programs, KSAP. Worked with them down through the 20 plus years, and we were able to bring Jenna Cassidy on as a representative from them. She's an attorney. She's their policy officer for KSAP, and so they're very active in wanting to see this roll out too, because again, we're just going to make things more improved in the state to help more I hate to say the word victims, that's what's kind of used, the word victim. I like to say the word folks, that's endured this. And they now have, the state has hired a lovely lady, which I know her, and I've worked with her as a SANE coordinator, where we're going to try to go into hospitals and get more SANEs on board, nurses who's willing to go this route and do this extra care. I think a lot of the drawback, I work with the Kentucky Hospital Association, and I meet with them sometimes, and they've asked, what do you think is the drawback? Well, the drawback is most of the time, sexual assault, domestic violence, partner violence doesn't happen like 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. It happens after hours, up and late at night. I think I can count on one hand how many times I went in during a daytime, so to speak, 9 to 5, and that's because the client didn't, come forward till the next day, to the ED to seek assistance. But most of the time, immediately thereafter, a few hours later, it's up in the night. During COVID, I was very, very busy. Sometimes I had two a day, 2 cases to do a day. I had like 7 in 1 week, or about 9 days. I had 7 cases because people were housed, could not get out. I've done exams during COVID in ICUs because people were violated, assaulted, and thrown out in the snow. And they were brought in by EMS and had to be under ICU care, and I had to do the exam in there because during their intake at the hospital, they said they'd been violated. And so you have to be prepared to go anywhere. I've had, clients that have had objects impaled inside them, and so they have to go to surgery, and you wait for that evidence to come out that they said had been impaled in them. And so you have to be willing to be very flexible. Luckily for me, I live about 20 minutes from Flemingsburg, 5 minutes from Meadowview, and if they can't catch me by phone, they have my husband's phone, and sometimes if that maybe our phones are down or something, or in another room, they've even sent the law enforcement to kind of check on me, make sure I'm okay, and that I got the call.
Yeah.
And so I went in after, they've sent the Maysville Police Department after me, but no, we have a good working relationship.
I bet your neighbors are wondering what Tom's doing over there, or you.
Yeah, exactly. Some blue lights in the driveway. But COVID was a very hard time, and I have done all walks of life, from all entities in life, and like I said, incarceration, medical institutions, just all walks of life,
Dr. Sims, you probably know this podcast is called Faith and Law.
Mm-hmm.
And rightfully so, we've discussed a large portion of the law aspect and the forensic dynamic. I'm interested, and I don't know how this would play out or if it could, but are these victims, folks, ever given the opportunity to seek spiritual care?
I personally don't know a good answer for that. I know they are followed intensely by the crisis center or advocacy, and maybe that's an option that comes up at that time. I know on my end, when I'm kind of finishing up my case, and I'm the last person to kind of see them before they leave, because the doctor comes in and they start the discharge and stuff at the hospital, and if I feel comfortable enough with my client, because we've built a quick rapport there over a matter of hours, that I can say to them, I'll be praying for you. I say that.
Good.
Okay, I do say that, but to me, to represent Christ in the most honorable fashion is to show them I'm there because I care and I want to help them at probably one of the darkest times in their life.
Okay.
I know I've been asked many times, was I ever a victim myself? No, I've never been a victim, and I thank God for that. But I have had family members who were when they were children, and that just made my determination to move forward with this as a SANE nurse even stronger. And I want to give kudos to Midway College. I was a student there when this came available. I read in the newspaper where a client had to leave Meadowview. It was in the paper because no sane nurse was available. And I thought, this should never be. You know, we had one nurse at the time and she was doing the best she could. She has since retired. I took her place. And I went to my professor at Midway and I asked them if I could, you had to kind of do like a mini, almost capstone doctorate project there to get out of your program. And I said, you know, I would like to do this. I want to go take the training in Northern Kentucky. I want to become licensed. So my career as a sexual assault nurse examiner, SANE, forensic nurse, or whatever, is totally attributed to Midway College. I had a professor, Dr. Barbara Kitchen, who encouraged that. She stepped out on faith with me. She said, nobody's ever asked that. But she said, if you're determined, I'll let you do that. So they get a lot of credit because they encouraged me to move forward with it. And so to go back now and consult with them is a great honor, and I'm very humbled because they are the ones that started this.
Wonderful. So will all of those classes, Jonathan, I'm sorry, I've kind of just...
No, this is great. This is great.
Will all of the courses, classes that Midway offers through this program, will they be in person on their campus, or are they online, or?
The nice thing about this, it's going to, hopefully, we plan to have it 100% online.
Okay, very good.
That's so the convenience of the learner and the student, you know, and as we kind of muddle our way on through and get things more ironed out, you know, we'll have more particulars. But, you know, we do have a curriculum because I'm the one that kind of sat down and I did the standards or the benchmarks against the accrediting bodies to make sure we were meeting everything within those standards and substandards, you know, for the program as, you know, as a rollout as a whole. And it's not, you know, gender-based, male, female, you know, students are welcome to join in this. And we've had a lot of great interest in the program as well.
Good. I mean, that's good that there's interest, but bad that there has to be this field of expertise.
Yeah, amen. I see you motioning at me, Pastor. I think that the subjects that we're talking about here this morning are not pleasant, and this is the nitty gritty reality of what our law enforcement and prosecutors and forensic examiners have to deal with on a frequent, if not daily basis. We're routinely talking about things that are horrible to deal with, and it's just part of the process. One thing that has always struck me about working with these kinds of cases is how bizarre the MO is. You talked about inserting objects and leaving a trophy, and this is not romance that went awry. This is something worse. This is predation. This is something very sick and
may I add demonic.
Demonic, I think that's a great term.
Yes.
You know, I took a couple of notes as we were talking, Dr. Sims, for potential victims. You know, the critical thing, as you and I both hopefully hit home, is this is a piece of evidence, and this evidence is leverage for us to either prevent that person from ultimately having to take the witness stand, or to augment that person when they do take the witness stand. That way it's not a he said, she said. So what is the message? I know we've got a lot of followers from a lot of walks of life. What's the message to those potential victims and family members of victims? How do they avail themselves of a SANE examination?
Well, first of all, I would like to say, no matter who it is in your home or in your life that tells you, I don't feel comfortable around someone, or something's happened to me and I need to talk to someone, please believe them, because unfortunately, many of these predators, and that's what I'm calling them, come from all walks of life. All you have to do is look on social media. Who's been arrested today? Who's going to be arrested tomorrow for violation of sometimes the most innocent among us, the children. So I would encourage anyone that if you have had an encounter or an event where someone has taken you physically in any way against your will, to seek medical attention through the local emergency department in your county. It's not about you coming in and we believe you. That's like going in and saying, I think I'm having a heart attack, and we all like, oh no, you don't look like you're having a heart attack. That's not our place. Our place is to believe you. I believe every client I have ever encountered, because number one, there's not many people in life that has a goal of, I'm going to make this up and go in and tell it and go through this exam and through this questioning. So I would tell anyone, child, adolescent, adult, elderly person, if you have been touched or violated in any way, physically, mental abuse for that matter, go in and seek help, because the ER can get counselors if it's a mental abuse or a physical abuse or a combination of both. But to seek someone, if you're in a school system, seek a counselor, a teacher. Many times the younger teenage clients that I've had, they told a friend, and then a friend told someone in authority to help them, get the right kind of care that they needed. I hope that kind of answered your
That
question.
does,
to
yes.
some,
No, I
to some
think
degree.
that's good, and that's good to know. They don't necessarily have to call 911.
No,
They don't have to have a law enforcement encounter. They can just simply go to the local ER
yes.
or their local physician,
Mhm.
and they can start that process of getting an examination if that's what's needed.
Yes.
What about, so again, we've got a lot of people listening, hopefully, people who know nurses, people who are nurses. What would you say if there's a nurse out there that might be interested in this program and might be interested in becoming a forensic nurse, and maybe talk a little bit about the difference between forensic and SANE, but what would you tell those nurses? How can they find out more information about your program?
To well, if they're interested in becoming a sexual assault nurse examiner, reach out to the Kentucky Board of Nursing, because that's where the training is now kind of incorporated through their agency, and realize it's not for the faint of heart. I will say that, because I know when I was at the college, I always brought a piece of the same training and brought the kit and explained to the nurses there. And I had a lot of nurses that graduated and went on to become SANEs, but of course a lot of them's now in Northern Kentucky or Lexington. I think there's one in Portsmouth now, and they've taken that role. And so that's why it's important with this new program at Midway College, is we can start it in the educational arena, as well as, nurses just knowing it's out there. And again, I think nurses have a fear of testifying in court, because that's not generally their expertise, but there's training courses that's going to be available for that. Many times folks from the legal side, like you and others, will present and have training sessions for that, and KSAP's working on programs that will help to support and adhere to the needs of our clients across Kentucky, the state with the new SANE coordinator. But if you're interested, or even think you're remotely interested, I'll be glad to talk to them personally. And I've so to speak, mentored many that's went on. Some's like, no, it's not for me, or I can't come out at midnight. And I understand a single woman with small children that's a nurse, you couldn't come out at midnight, and maybe you have to be on the clock the next morning. But I would love to see, my always goal has been for both hospitals here is to have an on-call team of sexual assault nurse examiners. So let's say, first week in July, it's Rhonda's turn. Second week, it's, Amy's turn. I know St. Clair kind of has something similar to that right now, because they've talked to me about coming on and being part of their team. And so they have done the kind of right thing at UK St. Clair. They have an on-call team for sexual assault cases.
I guess one of the biggest advantages, if that's a good word, for this type of examination and law enforcement and the legal side, is to take these predators off the street, because most all of them, if I remember reading the statistics, are repeat offenders when it comes to this sin, is from my perspective. And I've talked to many people in counseling as a pastor that have went through this, and the shame that comes with that, even though they're innocent, is almost debilitating. And I just want to say that if anyone needs spiritual help, they can reach out to our church, or we have at least one counselor certified in a doctorate program that can assist to the best of our ability. And if you're okay with it, Dr. Sims, maybe you can supply an email address that I can put in the show notes, or something that they could email you, or if you have an extension through Midway, or whatever works there. Because I think that you are not just a valuable resource to this community, but in many ways invaluable. And I really sincerely mean that. I've seen the compassion that you have for kids through CASA, and through this work here as a SAINN and forensic nurse. So excellent, heavy, but excellent interview. It's the reality of the times in which we're living, unfortunately.
Yeah. I will add this, that many times later, months, even a few years after my hospital encounter with a client, then I will encounter them again in a work environment, or maybe they're now a student at the college. And probably the most humble and fulfilling part of that particular first event was when I see them going on to have a life, and they'll actually ask me, and my husband, he's generally with me, and he generally understands that their concept quicker than I do sometimes, because they'll be like, I'll never forget this lady at a drive-through. I can see her now. And she said, do you remember me? And of course, I took care of a lot of patients over the years, and I mean hospital patients, or taught a lot of nursing students in almost 25 years. And so I'd be like, I'm looking at them, looking in their eyes, and I'm like, I'm sorry, did I teach you? And of course, my husband's sitting there, and he knows exactly what they're meaning. She said, no, you took care of me at one of the worst times in my life at the hospital. I knew right then what she was talking about. But the thing about that, in my defense, is many times when I see them, it's the worst time in their life, and they're disheveled. Yeah. They don't look like they do when they're happy and they've got a job and I'm driving through a drive-through, but to see them then walk the hall at the college, or speak to me, afterwards, or I encountered a couple clients later on when I was doing some pet therapy at a facility, because I have 2 pet therapy dogs, and we visit various entities to support other folks. And that right there is my reward. Okay. There's no monetary great reward for this job. Unfortunately, it's a state thing. There's not a lot of funds. It's your willingness to go that extra mile in the middle of the night or in the afternoon to help someone who's probably been one of the worst traumatic events in their life.
Amen.
Pastor, if I may, I would just
Sure.
close on this note. If you're listening, if you were either a victim or somebody that it was a victim, no matter what background or station that victim has, they have value, and they're one of God's children, and that should not have happened to them. And I would encourage that anybody that fits that bill, if there's not been a disclosure made, to make the disclosure. In other words, to report what happened, and law enforcement will investigate, and we'll see if there's anything that we can do to charge. So that's something that I would encourage people to do, is come forward and let law enforcement know, and let's see if there's a case to be made.
And back to what Dr. Sims said, if you don't maybe have the courage to speak to someone directly, maybe ask someone to speak on your behalf, like a teacher, counselor, or spiritual leader, or whoever in your family that you could trust. Great episode. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Dr. Sims.
Thank you.
We want to have you back on at some point, if that's okay.
Yes, that'll be fine.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for watching or listening to Faith and Law. share this with someone. Share it with as many folks as you can. There's a lot of hurting people in this world. We will post some information in the show notes that if you need to reach Dr. Sims, and maybe a hotline number that you can call and report anything of this nature. God bless you. Have a great day in Jesus' name. Bye-bye.